All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Zach, and this is Travail Office Hours. This is our first um, episode, I guess, of Travail Office Hours for 2024. So we have a pretty significant rulebook update from version 104 to 110 that we're going to go over tonight. If folks have questions, you can drop them in the chat at any time. Doesn't necessarily have to be about what we're talking about. And when we're done, I'll set aside some dedicated sort of question time. If we run into any technical issues or anything, just let me know. Everything should be. I haven't changed any settings since last year, but it's been 4 months since we've done one of these. So hopefully this is helpful for folks immediately following this. We will get this posted on the website, and the change log. So this is the change log that we're going to go through. The actual full rulebook document will also be available, and then we'll get the new updated PC cheat sheet up as well, so that folks can play with that and build characters and get their cheat sheets printed for the event, if that's a thing that you find helpful to you. So to get started here, so these changes that are in this document, and I say it's a significant change, and it is in some ways, but for the most part, you're gonna need to know, like, each player will need to know like 2 new things, probably, maybe 3. It's sort of a bigger change overall, but for any individual player who's probably only playing a couple of lists that are in the game, not crazy. Not like a total rework of the core mechanics of the game or anything. So most of the things in here should look familiar to everyone anyway. So these changes that we're going to be going over, the changes that we decided to implement, are based on feedback that we received from players and NPCs and from the staff, things we chatted about, things we noticed, things that we noticed with players and NPCs, and while we were playing the game, where we were like, maybe this could probably be a little cleaner, more fun, whatever. So the rulebook is a living document. Where the hope is always to get it to a point where it never needs changes anymore. But the number one thing that we that we try to keep in mind as we're doing this is that the game is supposed to be fun, right? The rule system is like the LARP for fun rules system, right? That we've incepted over here. So fun, number one priority. And then like fun, then fairness, then the whole list of other nice things, but fun is at the top. So the other thing is that a lot of the changes that have taken place since the initial release of the rulebook are because there are many more folks at the game than we anticipated there being, which is great. We love having people in the community, having new people come in, telling cool stories together. That's the point of the whole thing. And so some of these changes will reflect the idea that there are 50% more people than the rule system potentially was built to handle. And so by scaling stuff back, we can sort of keep things a lot cleaner. We keep the combat cleaner and more manageable. When we play enemies that are supposed to be dangerous, we don't have to go out with big piles of crazy abilities. So you'll see some of that stuff reflected in here. And there's a couple of notes in here as well after we sort of go over. There's a summary of the changes. Then there's some notes of things that we wanted to share with all of you. that sort of talk about some of our design principles and expectations that you can have of the rule system and how it works, and when you face enemies, what that might look like, and sort of a little bit of why things are the way they are, without showing all of how the sausage is made, because that's not good for anybody. But just enough to be like, hey, this is why. If you run into this thing, this is why we're doing it, and this is intentional and part of the design, because we think it makes the game more fun. So yeah, with all of that said, we'll hop into the change summary here. So basically everything in the summary is broken out in more detail further down. Oh yeah, I was giving so there's a change summary, and then after the summary is some notes from us. Then we'll do like the specific like list changes, so which is probably the part that everybody wants, but I'm going to try to trick all of you into listening to most of this to get to the part that everybody wants to get to the most. All right, so thank you for everybody that's here and watching. I think the first one of these that I did before the game started had like 2 people, which was also great. But yeah, this is like a lot more people than usual, which is awesome. So let's get into this. Some of these will sound familiar to folks who read the changelog going into the last event of last year, because these were things that we had sort of teased and pre-hooked, to use our LARP lingo, right? All right, so here's our change summary. So this is a thing that we knew was going to happen. The Herald of Malevolence prestige path, which used to be in the magic user devout category, has been replaced by the thaumaturge. So the thaumaturge list we will go over later. That'll be after we go over the fun technical parts of the rulebook that have changed. And and also, as we're going to see in a second, Herald of Malevolence is not gone. So Herald of Malevolence has moved to a new prestige path category, and this is something that we had said we were going to do as well. So there's a new category. It's called Malevolence, right? So the rest of them are like Fighter Scoundrel, Fighter Magic User, Fighter Devout, Scoundrel Magic User, Scoundrel Devout, Magic User Devout. This one's just called Malevolence. Points in. So there's a note on that in a minute about exactly how folks will earn points in the new Malevolence category. And so folks who have previously, and yeah, actually, it is like literally the next note. I got you. So Herald of Malevolence goes to a new category called Malevolence. There was I updated the character sheets and the character sheet template, so there's like a new category on there, and the word malevolence is way longer than the other one, so it's like it's got like its big own box like over to the right, which is very fun. And so in addition to that, like all of the other categories, this one also has 2 options in it. And so when we moved Herald of Malevolence out of Magic User Devout, we put Thaumaturge in its place. New list, and we added this other new list called Marauder of Malevolence, which is a melee oriented malevolence list, which I'm very excited to share with everybody also later. So these 2 will be sort of at the end. Those are our introducing like these new lists is sort of the end of our thing. All right, so next, talking about sort of how we're going to implement this new category. I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep clicking the wrong thing. All right, there we go. All right, so let's just get this whole thing. There we go. Perfect. All right. So existing characters that have Magic User Devout prestige potential can move any amount of it into the Malevolence category. It says at or before the next event they attend. We're not going to be that strict about it, but so basically, if you had points in the category that you could have applied, that would have applied to the Herald of Malevolence list before, because it used to be in Magic User Devout, you can move those over into the malevolence category, because there was no opportunity to earn them before. And so if people were playing them or wanted to be playing this, if that was sort of the goal, those folks can slide those points over. Yeah, it's a heritage. It's right there. It's written down. And so if folks took prodigious because they wanted points toward malevolent stuff, they can swap out the heritage for another one. Not a problem. So if for folks that have attended all 3 events that have happened so far, and don't have all 3 points of prestige potential in Magic User Devout, but want all 3 points to end up in the malevolence category that they've earned so far, you can move 2 of them for free, and then the third one you'll have to figure out an in-game thing to do, and that is not a punishment. There is as some folks know, there is a story and lore component to taking this list, and we'll look at the new sort of rulebook entry about malevolence and the list, and it talks a little bit about that too. And so there's like a game experience that goes along with it, and so I would like every player to have that experience or have a chance to sort of do that. And so not a punishment. This is part of the journey. So yes and no. This is sort of like if you want to play like the anti-hero, or sort of like player characters dabbling with like the darker side of things in the universe. This is the rest of the lists in the game that are not malevolence are designed more broadly so that individual characters, based on like, you know, character histories and the worlds that they're from and the cultures that the characters are part of, like we don't have a paladin, we have a champion. And so you might be from a world where champions are paladins, right? And you can call yourself a paladin and be a paladin. And there's like a story, right, that probably goes along with that, that's based on, you know, lore that's separate from the list itself. And so that probably works its way into your character's story somehow. This is the malevolence lists are sort of the exception to that rule, where it's a game world specific, right? Like an in-world specific sort of like school of magic and energy that's happening. It's one of our like unique things. So those are the rules around sort of moving prestige potential into new categories. And then there's sort of more nitty gritty about that later on that we'll get to. So moving on in the summary. So we're updating some of the game terminology in a couple of places. One of these updates is the old effect to effect term. It was a little clunky for our taste. Excuse me. So we're going to update that to ability combo into ability. And so that's hopefully a little more sort of intuitive, right? And so there's two ways that that can exist. So ability combo into ability can show up as an attribute. And that follows a lot of the rules that are similar to tenacity. And again, once we get to those abilities and what they look like and what they do, this will make a bit more sense. And can also just show up as a non-attribute ability, right? Where it's you get an ability, and then if it once you if that ability is effective, and we'll talk about what that means too, then you get another different ability, all for like the price of one ability use. So This allowed us to, one, update terminology for a number of existing abilities that were like something to something, and so now all of those are, something combo into something. And it also allowed us the opportunity to introduce some new abilities and attributes into the book. Some stuff that we had wanted to introduce into the game initially, but didn't have a really good way to introduce that idea. And so this we think this is going to let us do that. So a little bit of the specifics now, more of the specifics later. For the so if you know the tenacity rules, and the tenacity rules are tenacity is always an attribute, and if you're using an ability that has all of the words preceding tenacity in that attribute name, then when you use that ability, you get another use of the same ability for free afterwards as the next ability you use within 10 seconds. And so that next ability you use within 10 seconds also applies to all instances of ability combo into ability. So the and then there is a difference. There is like sort of one key difference, but we'll get to that in the sort of nitty gritty of it later. But for attributes, you can activate the ability combo into ability attributes with the same frequency as tenacity, right? So you can use each tenacity that you have with a basic ability once a minute, defined under our normal like once a minute, right? Which is each time you refresh all basic. And then you can use it with a complex once per hour, right? Also defined as every time you refresh all complex. And then with other abilities as often as it applies. Sorry for the, hold on one sec. All right. Someone's at the door. And then applies to other ability. You can use it with other abilities, ultimates, bestowments, items, right? Like consumable items or extraordinary items or what have you, any number of times. So most of the rules, same as tenacity, but tenacity allows you to use the same ability again. And then the combo into stuff is going to be you use ability A, and then you'll get a different ability, right? You'll get ability B to use, right, for free as a follow-up. And so we'll get to see lots of examples of that shortly. All right. Oh, that's not what I wanted. All right. There we go. All right. So that's effect. Ability combo into ability is our new terminology. All right. We're adding a new prefix keyword. So we had some before, right? We had like loan and ritual and some of those fun ones. And thanks for tuning in, Ray. Have a good one, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. So we're going to introduce a new prefix keyword. It's dual, and we'll get into some of the whys of this in a second. But the what's of this is any ability with the word dual on it, and I think there's only like 6 or 7 in the whole book, are limited to the number of times they can be used over all dual abilities that you know. All right, so it only applies to complexes. So, and you can use 2 dual abilities each hour, regardless of which ones they are or how many your character might have access to. So this is going on stuff like it says in this is going to go on things like parries and dodges and like blanket active resistance, like resist magics, resist psionics, and then some of the like powerful absorb abilities that show up on some of the prestige lists. Okay. And so those are where dual is going to show up. And like it says, we don't have any plans to apply it to any other kind of abilities at this point. Not on basics or ultimates or anything. It's literally something that we are introducing just for powerful active defenses. Well, I can show you the rest of this, which is so here's like the first. All right, so so just a quick note, right? There's one. I think there's one instance in the rulebook of a dual loan ability, which means that that ability can only be used once per hour and counts towards your 2 dual abilities for the hour. So you can use 2 duels again when you refresh all complex, whether that's because the top of the hour or because you received a refresh all complex effect. So basically all the time when we say per minute, per hour, per twilight, that we mean like every time you refresh all basics, every time you refresh all complexes, every time you refresh all ultimates. And that could be because of time or because of a direct effect that you receive. So the dual means that any ability with that word in the name, and we'll see them in a little bit, you can only use 2 abilities with the word dual in them each hour. That's really it. So you get 4 complexes an hour, but if you know dual parry, you can only use 2 parries in an hour. If you know dual parry and dual dodge, you can only use a total of 2 parries or dodges in the hour, or a total of 2 of any combination of parry and dodge in an hour. And that means that your other 2 complexes would have to be used on other abilities. It does not cost double. They still cost a single complex to use, but only 2 of your complexes can be parries, right? When I use a parry, it still costs 1 complex, but I can only use it for 2 of my 4 complexes for the hour. So yes, but it also covers like if I know multiple dual abilities, I can only use 2 total of a combination of any of them within the hour. So sort of like loan, but like an extra step beyond loan. So like of your 4 complexes, 2 of them like can be duals, right? So you can use them for things that aren't. But if you use one of the 2, like if you use a parry, now you only have 1 left, right? You spent 1 of them. And then if you use another parry, now you've got 2. Now you can't use any more dual abilities for the hour, right? So if I use a parry and then I use a dodge, now I can't use any more dual abilities until I refresh all of my complexes. Yes, and I'm going to get to that here in just a moment, which is the whys of doing this. And this ties a little bit into what I was talking about before, where the rule system wasn't initially designed to scale in this way. And so yes, so this change will help with long-term game balance and means that NPC enemies need fewer powerful effects to pose a challenge to player characters. Additionally, it's important to us that we encourage variety in ability use and, as often as possible, avoid a best build or optimal ability use scenario. So we're hoping to avoid an instance where folks feel like it's only worthwhile, or sort of, come on, focus, or it's the most worthwhile, right, to use every one of their complexes as a parry or a dodge or something, right? We don't want that to be the case, and we're going to keep working to try to make sure, come on, that the rule system has abilities that are better at complex, right, than a parry or a dodge might be. But also, can we focus? No, we're not gonna do it, huh? All right. It'll come around, hopefully. But also, in the interim, it's better for it's better for the game and better for us, creating enemies to fight, where we're not going to have 4 times the number of players in the game of active, like hard avoidances that work against basically everything that we use against people. Um, so, and so yeah, that's the point of putting duel in, is to sort of put put a limiter on those hard avoidances. But the vast majority of abilities in the book do not have that, and there's no plan to put anything like that on them. Right, the stuff that's lone will still be lone, and that's like its own category of thing that's going on. But we have some of this in place to really don't like to focus right now. There we go. All right, that's much better. All right, so moving on to the next stuff. All right, so all the abilities in the rule book, literally every one of them, that cost more than one of an ability usage to use, right? The stuff that would be like, oh, this costs double, that's all gone. Sayonara, see you later. So anything that cost 2 basics before is 1 basic now, and has seen some other sort of change as well to how the ability is used or what it does, in order to balance it out to being a single basic use still. And so that is another sort of set of specific changes that we'll get to later with the specific changes. Okay. Let's see. Some of the insight attributes have been moved to higher levels. This is in an effort to minimize the total number of insight attributes that a single character can have at a time. And this is, again, we'll get to the specifics in a bit, but this is for non-scoundrel lists. Well, don't get ahead of yourself. There's just changes to stuff. It doesn't mean nothing's gone. We try to not take a thing out completely, especially if it's something that folks are enjoying. That's the point of it. So you'll see what the change was to Ranger to get that back into sort of parity with and the level of complexity lowered from having stuff cost 2 basics and having like sort of a weird action economy that goes along with it. But the words lone, backstab, maim have not left the rule book. So insight attributes for non-scoundrel, we'll see that many of them have gone up in the level that they show up at. Which means that at 10 potential, the total number of insight attributes that a character can have has been lowered, which is what we want. We want folks to have to pick when to use their insights. And certainly don't want folks to have more insights than they feel like they can use on discover requests in an event. All right, what else? This one's more of a reminder than anything, and shows up, I think, as a reminder later too. Lethal effect is always short, unless specifically stated otherwise. We're going to keep the word short in lethal effect calls, but we just wanted to put a reminder and sort of a blanket statement that, like, unless you're specifically unless someone calls magic, lethal maim, 1 minute or 5 minutes or something, then the default, right, will be 10 seconds. So if you sort of didn't catch everything, but you heard lethal, it's 10 seconds. All right, what else? So we updated the inflict effect, and this won't have an impact on most players probably, but so there's 2 changes. The first is that it can be applied to any effect call, not just damage. So before, you could do inflict 2, inflict 5, inflict 2 fire, inflict 5 lightning, inflict 10 silver. Now it can be on anything, right? Inflict short pain, inflict, maim, whatever. And now, in addition to not being able to be reduced or soaked, because soak is just reduced to 0 damage, right? So no reduce, no soak, and now no return calls from anything. So players that have inflicts, they just got better because the enemies can't return them, and also inflict calls that enemies use got more dangerous because you can't return them. You have to have like some kind of hard avoidance, like your resists or your resist no effect, parry, dodge, absorb, that come from various sources. So this is sort of like a middle level of more difficult to avoid. But the top, right, the top level is the defenses, right, is like our defenses, like our there's nothing in the game and no plans unless it's like in a specific contained plot or module or something. We don't have any plans to make something that can't be resisted or dodged or parried or something. That's not a plan that we have, and I can't foresee us implementing something like that. All right. So the suggestion effect got a little bit of an extra clarification about the statement being made to your target after you cast the spell or use the ability, that it's an in-game statement. That rule hasn't changed. Also, in addition, there are new options and possibilities for using suggestion effects. And so we'll see those pop up across some lists as well. But before we do that, we'll talk about how that's sort of being implemented and what's happening there, and a little bit of the whys of us wanting to make that change. And there's an update to social abilities as well, and it's probably not what you're thinking. The changes, this is like all good. There's like nothing's being removed from this part of it. We're only adding possibilities and adding stuff to this. All right, next. So with the changes to some of the hard avoidances, right, like parry and dodge and resist magic and all of that, the powerful active avoidances, we're removing the limitation on how frequently fortitude can be used. So if you do have fighter as your path and you have 10 potential, so you have fighter level 10, you have you still have a additional access to very powerful response calls. Fortitude, arguably the best defensive call in the game, and that will and so we wanted to make sure that we didn't want to make it dual, we didn't really want to make it lone, and we didn't really want it to have that arbitrary 1-minute timer that nothing else in the game except gesture effects had. And so we just took it off completely. And so go for it. Use 2 parries and 2 fortitudes if you want. If you're like a really high level fighter, go for it. We would like you to feel like a powerful fighter while you're out there on the field. Let's see, a couple more things here. Clarified in chapter 5 that psychic abilities don't require incants. Only things with the magic type that are not quick cast, right, require the 7-syllable incant. So this is not a rules change, just a reminder. You can certainly have you can have an incant or some other role play element to your character using psychic abilities. This doesn't prevent anyone from doing anything, but we just want to make sure that folks knew that there wasn't a requirement, and so there's like an extra sentence about that. And let's see, we just like a little clarifying text added in chapter 7 about delivering death strikes, and what and how to deliver enchanted death strikes. Simple game calls are in there, and an additional sort of clarifying text about what things would allow an enchanted death strike to be made, right? So normally death strike 1, death strike 2, death strike 3, right? To a helpless or willing creature. If you have so let's see. if you have a weapon with an enchantment on it, you can do an enchanted death strike. So like you have a fire enchantment on your weapon, you can do fire death strike 1, fire death strike 2, fire death strike 3. If you have a packet ability of an energy type, then you can do a death strike with that packet of the enchanted energy. But there's a handful of effects in the game that are like, like melee 2 silver, that cannot be used to deliver a death strike, to deliver like a silver death strike in that case. So it needs to be a packet ability with an energy type or an enchanted weapon. And there's some exceptions, of course, but that's the general rule. So that is, and that's so our spellcasters are sort of on point for energy necessary death strikes, or ideally having energy death strikes around. We want our casters to be able to do that. Let's see, what do we got? One more note here. Yeah. All right. So this is more clarifying text. This rule has not changed. The death strike rule also has not changed. It's just clarifying text to help make the rulebook clear. So the weakness effect, which was added after the game started last year. So the weakness effect prevents ability use. There's some other things it does, but the important part is that it prevents ability use. And so what does that mean? Because that's not really well defined anywhere. So what it means is that anything on your character sheet that's sort of in the that comes from like a path, subpath, specialization, prestige path, or like an ability from like a trial that you have, anything that requires like an active use, right? You're spending something to use it, is not usable. But things that you don't use, so if you have a passive defense in place from something, right, like a resist from a grant effect, if I received like a grant resist magic, and then I get hit with a backstab weakness, now I can't use my abilities, but if I get hit with a magic effect after that, my passive grant resistance is still there. It's not a thing that I'm using or choosing to use. It's sort of it's sitting there in place, right? It's not an ability use, it's just there. Also, while under the weakness effect, you can use game items, unless it's something that specifically says otherwise. But like the consumables that everybody is making at the crafting areas in the tavern. So attributes, I guess if you had an ability from something else that you had an attribute for, you could still use it. Yeah, so if you have like a packet magic 2 damage tenacity, and then you have like a magic missile scroll, and you use the scroll and you throw the magic 2 damage, and you have tenacity for it, you can throw another one. But the attributes that give you sort of unlimited uses of an ability, those are sort of like falling into the ability use category instead of like an attribute activating or letting you modify something. So yeah, some of them, yes. Anything that's like its own ability would probably be no. But most of the ones that actually give you like an unlimited number of something, like take a minute to do anyway. So like in combat, you probably wouldn't be doing that anyway. Yeah, I'll take a look through the attributes and see if there's anything that sort of like is in like a weird middle ground. But I think it's pretty good. And honestly, if somebody uses one, it's not a big deal. We're not trying to make the rules overly complicated either. This is another thing that's not like actually a change. And more importantly, we wanted to make sure that folks knew that there's like there's monsters that we play and enemies that we play that they have ability uses that they can't use while they're weaknessed, but there's sort of other properties that they have that might still be in place, right? Like a fire creature that's absorbing fire damage will like using a weakness on that creature probably won't stop it from absorbing fire. But it would stop it from using any like parries or dodges that it had. But will not disable like sort of these creature properties that are out there. And so these creature properties are like a category that's like outside of things that are on player character sheets. And so yeah, you'll stop it from doing some stuff, but you might not be able to stop it from doing everything. But there may be other ways to stop it from doing those other things. But the weakness effect is not the answer. Is not the catch-all for everything. All right, let's see. Couple friendly reminders, and we say that that's not tongue-in-cheek, it's not facetious, not patronizing. These are things that we noticed across the board. Some of them are things that we found ourselves doing, or NPCs had questions about, or just sort of seemed confusing, or maybe unintuitive for folks who were coming from other games or in the rule system as a whole. So just I think there's like 3 of them here. Yeah, just a couple quick notes for stuff to go over. All right, so armor repair. So there's anyone that's wearing physical armor has some number of uses of it that can either be used for return against melee attacks, or a soak 2 against any non-inflict damage. Right, we talked about inflict. You can't soak it, so soak is reduced to 0 damage. It's just the shorthand for that. It means your target spent some kind of resource that they had to take 0 damage instead of whatever else was happening, usually in response to damage. So once those are gone, once you've used them all up, or if you have only some of them left and want to get them back, right? Every character in the game can spend a ritual focusing period. And so that's 1 uninterrupted minute doing taking no other game actions or doing anything strenuous in order to get it back. So that minute can't also be, doing something else or using another skill or running around. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You're spending a dedicated minute doing nothing except talking, walking, and repairing your armor. And if you do anything that's not that, then you need to start your minute over. And that's it. And there's no real game calls that go along with it, but you should be doing some kind of role play action, right? Anytime there's an ability that's a ritual or short ritual, the hope is that, and sort of the cue from us is for folks to use that time to represent what they're doing. Next one is that weapon enchantments. So weapon enchantments at Travail only add the energy word to attacks that already have a game call. That's sort of the simplest way that I've found to describe it. So if you receive a fire enchantment on your weapon and you're just swinging regular attacks that do 1 damage, you wouldn't add the fire call to that, right? They're still uncalled weapon attacks. But if you use a weapon ability, right, like a melee or backstab ability, you have the option of adding that energy type to it. It's also not a requirement. It gives you another option, right? So if I'm using a melee 2 damage with a fire enchanted sword, I can call 2 damage because I don't have to use it. I can also call 2 fire, and I can do that with other things, right? Short disable or short fire disable. I can, right? It gives me an option, but there shouldn't. There's nothing that we've written on our side, and there's no way for a player to just call fire when they're swinging their sword. So just a quick reminder on that one. Let's see. Right, and then just the last reminder is that anytime you're hit with an attack or an effect, that it just needs to be acknowledged. And we are doing our best to be good about that. We are, reminding NPCs that, that's the expectation at Travail. And so we're also going to extend that reminder about that expectation to players as well. And the perfect scenario would be all of us, role playing everything that happens to us, and that's not always, is not that can't always happen in all situations, and we're not necessarily, expecting that. If somebody misses a thing here or there, the other expectation is that if you use something and it's not acknowledged at all, then you didn't use it. So it's better for everyone if everybody's acknowledging things, because if you're getting hit with effects and like damage effects and you're not reacting to them, then your opponent has no way to know that they were used, and so they'll probably just use them again, which nobody wants to have happen. Yeah, quick reminder: just acknowledge stuff as it's happening. Right, we have rules about the pace of combat and the speed that folks can make offensive effect calls in place for a reason. Yeah, it makes the game more fun. It generally helps folks count hits better. It leads to just sort of more accurate, cleaner, more fun and engaging combat. So that's the hope there. All right. So summary done. Friendly reminders done. The next section is 2 notes that we wanted to share with folks about a little bit of how we put things together on our side. And it's nothing crazy, but it's things that matter, and that will one of them is a thing that will start to matter even more as time goes on. And so we wanted to help get this idea out there. So the first one, and these like sort of go across pages, so it's going to be a little weird here. All right. So after this is like our technical changes, and then the actual ability list changes. So we're getting there. So before we get into that, right? 2 design pillars, right? Of what we do that are one of them sort of like a rules one, and the other one is like a kind of gameplay-y one. So first, one of the goals of the combat rules is to ideally keep game calls to 3 words or less, right? While also leaving enough options to create unique and compelling and interesting abilities across different creatures that get played and different ability lists that show up. And so we've structured the effect calls the way that we have in order to use them to help tell stories about what's going on, to provide some additional sort of environmental insight to what something is doing, right? Like if something uses like an ability that's like poison to fire, number one, it's rules functional, because if your character has the ability to respond to either poison or fire, now they can have a special interaction with this thing that's happening. But also, like, what does poison fire look like? That might be some kind of acid or something, right? Or it could be some kind of liquid, some kind of like toxic liquid that ignites when it hits air or hits fabric or skin or something, right? So there's some cool implications that can happen with those things. And so but we try to keep it to 3 words or less, because it can be difficult to parse, right? Like a long game call can be very difficult to parse in the heat of the moment, and that's not the goal. And so the one specific thing that we noticed last year was that a lot of times where we and this was like where the lethal reminder comes from, right? Is that everything lethal is by design supposed to be short, right? You're supposed to have 10 seconds for you or a friend to cure that effect in some way, or you're done, right? It's supposed to make like a fun, dramatic, intense moment, right? For 10 intense seconds to see if you can, resolve it unexpectedly. But that adds 2 words into an effect. and doesn't necessarily like tell more of a story, right, than just like lethal. But we also don't want to create an exception for a single word in the game also meaning 10 seconds or something. So we're gonna keep monitoring this, and like I said before, we're not changing what the game calls are yet. We may change sort of the how we're calling and delivering those effects to try to make, you know, to try to help it be clearer when the stuff gets used, because it's also these effects are also big deals. And so this was the one thing where we found that folks were like, oh, I didn't hear that it was short. And so the reminder is like, it's always short. Like if you did hear lethal in there somewhere, like it's short. We called it, but also as like that extra reminder, it is. And so and we don't want to cut other words out, right? We don't want to be like, oh, like we only do short lethal effect, right? I want us to be able to put magic, poison, psychic, or an energy type on there or something, so that folks can use specialized resistances against them. And in a perfect world, it'd be like psychic, short lethal, fire, pain. That's like a lot of words though, and is too much to parse. So we're it's a thing that we are aware of, and it's a thing that we're thinking about. And so for now, it's just like the reminder, and we're going to keep doing things the way that we are and see if we can sort of resolve some of this way. Otherwise, there could be an additional change in the future at some point. But that's our intent, and that's our hope, and what we're going to, the thing that we're going to keep working toward. All right. So that one is like a game call. What the heck? Let me just cue this up over here. Cool. All right. Right. So we're not going to restructure game calls, but this is the design principle that influences the effect calls that do show up in game. And so there are some functional rules implications that have happened because we are intentionally trying to limit the number of words that go into a single call to make it easier to parse in the middle of of combat. Next, and this next one's a little more than I would usually want to share, but I want folks to I think it's really important for players to know this one. So we're pulling back the curtain a little bit regarding enemy resistances and vulnerabilities, right? For like certain types of creatures, like, oh, like what I'm fighting an undead, like what does that mean, right? Or I'm fighting a construct, what does that mean? I'm fighting a plant creature, like what could that mean in this rule system, right? What does that mean at Travail? So in an effort to make the game more consistent and fun, the average monster that goes out does not have special qualities. If someone comes in NPCs at Travail for the first time, and they're like, I enjoy combat, and we're like, cool, great. These are our combat rules. This is the expectations for combat. And they're like, okay, cool. I think I got that stuff down, but I didn't really get a chance to read the rule book, or I got to read a little bit of it. That's just where I'm at, but I'm happy to be here and help. And we're like, great, we are super happy to have you. If our basic like skeletons have, specific immunities and vulnerabilities to like 3 or 4 different things, that's not really a reasonable expectation to make of folks. And also, there's it's not really their fault if, something doesn't get remembered, right, or something gets missed. And so the consistency sort of gets weird. And so we don't want to put that expectation on people. And we don't so basic monsters, don't expect them to have the sort of special qualities. And that might mean like it says further in, like that might mean that like regular undead are taking effects that you might not expect them to take, right? You're like, oh, well, like intuitively I wouldn't expect a skeleton to take like a psychic fear effect, right? Because it like doesn't have a mind, and it's like this like animated corpse, but it probably will. Now, so that's one part of it. The other part is that the more powerful or dangerous an enemy gets, the more special qualities that it has. So some of those things that you might have expected, right? And we will always have some amount of distinction, right? If there's enemies sort of different levels of danger out, of different power out, we will we'll always represent that in some way, even if it's not something that's like immediately apparent or something that someone would quote unquote expect. But there will always be something, and those ones that are more powerful or more dangerous will have more special qualities, and that's both sides of the coin. So there might be some skeletons out that you're fighting that are taking psychic effects from you, and then you might fight another skeleton that's out there that has armor on or something, and that one might not be taking your psychic effects. That might be resisting them or calling no effect to them, and that means that you're encountering something that that has some amount of special qualities to it, probably. That also means that this thing probably has some amount of weaknesses or some other special qualities that can be exploited. And so regular enemies that you face, you should be able to pretty much use everything on your sheet against them. And that's also part of the point, is we want player skills, we want player abilities to work. That's the baseline, is player abilities work. That's where we start from. And then, as encounters get more complicated or more dangerous, we that's when we modify things a little bit. But this is the so this is the design is what it comes down to. And it has been good so far, and I think it's going to continue to be good. But I wanted to make sure that we had shared this in some way with players, and so this is the expectation, and you can expect this of us, and this is a thing that we will be using moving forward, and that we've already been using. Actually, it's already been going on. Some folks might even have noticed it at this point. Those are our little extra bits that we wanted to share. Now we're going to get into technical rules changes. No ability lists yet. That's last. Got to stick around for that one. But all right. So rules changes. Changes to social and suggestion. Let's see. All right, let's start here. All right, so the goal is to make suggestion more usable, right? We want the suggestion effect to show up in game more than the maybe 0 times that it has. So these are the first section that we covered was a summary of the changes that were covered across that were going to be covered across the entire document. These are the specific technical changes that are being made to various rules in the game. So the things that we discussed before, where we said like, oh, there's going to be changes to social and suggestion things. These are what those changes are. Or the earlier section said some abilities will have dual added to them, right? We'll get to a section in a little bit where we talk about the exact specific things that those were. We just broke it up into a couple of sections and to give people an idea of the things that we were going to talk about, so we could cover them at a high level. Then move into talking about some of the some of the ideas behind some of the things that we're doing, and now really get into the nitty gritty now that we've chatted about things. So the goal is more suggestion effects get used during events. We want to see that happen. Also, acknowledging that social type abilities have a potentially limited application, that they can only be used in very specific scenarios, and sometimes that doesn't work out, and sometimes that's not your fault. Sometimes it's because another player did a thing that's not necessarily unreasonable to do, and so we wanted to provide more options here. And so in an effort to improve the player experience with these abilities, these are the changes that we're going to make, and see how they work out. Right, just like everything else, these are these are ideas that we had on how we think we can improve the experience. If it doesn't work out, we'll continue to make changes, right, and we'll continue to solicit feedback from folks about how it is, and we'll keep iterating on them until something fun happens. All right. So first, all instances of social abilities across the game. So everything that's in the book, everything that comes from trials, everything that's on game items, now has an additional ability to as another option. Sorry, my brain is getting ahead of itself on this. So there'll be an additional option that's not a social ability. So we want to continue to see if, as the game matures and evolves, and players are getting more of a chance to interact, right, with specific face characters and whatnot, and really just interact with non-combat characters, right, then we think that social effects are going to get more valuable, but that probably takes time. So we want to see if that happens, but we don't want folks to feel like they have, quote unquote, like it says in their, dead skills, right, that can't be used. And so so now there's certain levels of certain paths and specializations that have 2 abilities on them instead of 1. And we're going to see how that goes. So nothing is ever only social now. There's always something more that's available. All right. Second, there we go. Suggestion is now usable as a non-social effect. So previous iterations of the rulebook, it was only available as a social effect. Yeah. And so there's some stuff that goes along with this, right? So it still has no effect on targets that are actively fighting, right? But it can be used while there's combat going on. The target of suggestion still has the option to call no effect to it if they feel that they're actively in combat, or whatever suggestion they're given is unbelievable to them. That part has not changed from before. And so these when the suggestion effect shows up this way, and it's all packets. So there's sort of that aspect too, that it's like an active, thing that's happening. So there's still short rituals, and the intention is that folks spend those 10 seconds role playing with their intended target, right, in some way, shape, or form. And the instances that I ran into last year where I wanted folks to be able to use those abilities, but I'm like, I can't just change this, rule on the fly. Like, we got, like, for the moment, like, there's a combat encounter happening, and so the social effect can't happen. But I left every one of those instances saying to myself, I wish the rules supported this. And so we changed the rules so it would support this. So the non-social versions of these are still short rituals. So you need to be role playing for at least 10 seconds with your target. Um, and then, you know, you can deliver the suggestion effect. And if your target's not actively engaged in combat, right, like actively fighting people, then there's a pretty reasonable chance that you know, that your suggestion, you know, can work. And at that point, then it's up to them if they want to, you know, keep it going, if they get into combat in the next minute or whatever, or let it go a little longer. You know, now we're into fun time, right? Having fun with it, fun, making things fun and interesting. So as a note on here, now that we're sort of letting suggestion enter a broader spectrum of game activities, creatures that do not have the ability to communicate in a formal language are immune to suggestion, and you should not try it on them. And also, so this means the majority of monsters are not potential suggestion targets. Also, suggestion can't mimic other game effects. And we do have a list in the rulebook of like, here's some ideas about things that you might use suggestion for, and you can try other things too. And by and large, if you're a player and you're using them, you're probably using them on NPC characters that are being played by staff members. So there's a recommended list. The vast majority of like regular monsters that are out there, not going to be helpful on, right? But if there are, talky guys out there too, and you're maybe like encountering them away from other folks, and you're bantering with one another, and you throw a suggestion their way, you might have like a really interesting time over there. And that's what I'm hoping is going to happen. And so we'll see. We're going to try it, and again, if it doesn't work, we'll keep iterating on the rules until we find something fun. Yeah, this is something that we're actively keeping an eye on. I say keeping an eye on, but I mean it's a thing that we're actively assessing. And because we think that this is like a cool part of the game that's like, and we're trying to find a spot for it just as much as we're watching for spots for it to occur. So if you have these abilities, let us know after you've gotten to play with them this year. If there's things you wanted them to do, or like maybe you use them and you were like, this was like not what I thought might happen, and it felt not good, or this wasn't what I thought was going to happen and it felt great. All that information helps us. So a couple more notes. So all social abilities become short ritual, even if they were previously ritual. So all social abilities, 10 seconds of roleplay, not a minute ever on anything. And that means that some lists got new abilities or stuff got modified in order to accommodate those changes down to 10 seconds. So in the next section, talking about the next big section, right, which is the actual list changes. We'll go over all the specific changes, and then again, like I'd said, right, it's our hope that these changes make for a more fun and engaging experience, right? And we're not afraid to continue iterating on the rules until we reach that outcome. Okay, I'm losing my mouse cursor. All right, next, let's talk about our new combo into vernacular that we're introducing. All right. So here's the full text now, right? Some abilities allow a follow-up ability to be used contingent on the first ability's successful use. Here's our difference between tenacity, right? So Death Strike combo into Self-Heal 2, which is on Slayer. It's like Slayer 3, I think. Allows the free use of a Self-Heal 2 if a successful Death Strike is delivered, And as part of that, you need to spend a basic. So the free ability, which is the self-heal 2, has to be the next ability that you use, and it has to be used within the next 10 seconds, just like with tenacity. The second ability can only be used, the follow-up, right, can only be used if the first ability is at least partially successful. We're going to talk about what that means in this text momentarily. Melee attacks that are blocked or miss all targets, and packet attacks that miss all targets are expended without granting the follow-up, right? At Travail, once you make the call, the ability is used. So if I make a melee 2 damage, I call 2 damage, and I swing, and I whiff, or I hit a shield, or it gets blocked. My basic is spent, ability's spent, didn't do anything. So in the instance of something where I have a combo into that's contingent on that 2 damage landing, and it doesn't, it's just gone. I don't get the second part. Same thing if I throw a packet and miss, right? And it sails off into the ether. I don't get the second part. If the first ability is responded to with a no effect or return, then you don't get to use the follow-up, but it got refunded to you anyway, right? If any other game call is made in response to it, right? I connect with the weapon, it makes it past all shields and weapons and touches my opponent's body first. Or I throw a packet and it connects with my opponent or anything that they're holding. If they make any call that's not no effect or return, right? Anything that doesn't refund my ability to me, I get the next part, right? They dodge it, they parry it, they absorb it, they reduce it, they soak it. Any of those things, you still get the second part, right? So if your ability was used and you connected with it in the way that all the qualifying parts need to be, right, which is packet that hits person or thing they're holding, weapon strike that goes connects with the body before touching another weapon or shield, then you get the second part, right? If your initial ability was used and it did something, it got a reactionary call that didn't return it to you, then you get the second part. All right. And that's in the rule book now. The wording's here. That's not the case with tenacity because I like have a chart that talks about, like a flow chart about tenacity and why it doesn't need that. Just trust me that it doesn't. There's like 8 different scenarios, but tenacity doesn't need that and doesn't need to care about it. So if you use your like 2 damage, melee 2 damage, and then tenacity another one out, even if it got no affected or whatever, and that one works, then it did work, and now your tenacity spent for basics for the minute, and that's fine in all instances. It's fine, I promise. But the combo into stuff can get funny if the first part doesn't need to work. Also trust me on that one, because there's some real wild stuff that can happen, and I don't want it to. You don't want it to either. All right. So attributes of this type, and we're going to see some of those soon, such as backstab 2, combo into backstab 2 or melee 2 damage, means that anytime you use meaning that the follow-up ability can be used when the first ability is successfully used following the above rules. So this means if I have that ability, I use a backstab 2 against an opponent, I hit them in a way that satisfies all the requirements of a backstab 2, and they don't call return or no effect, I get either a backstab 2 or a melee 2 damage to use at no ability cost to me in the next 10 seconds, as long as it's the next ability that I use. Then, following the tenacity rules for frequency of use, because I have spent a basic to do it, and I got the benefit of it, I can't use it for a basic again until I refresh all my basics, either because a minute passed and I took 3 seconds to get them back, 10 seconds if I'm using a large shield or 2 long weapons, or because I used it on myself, or or a friend used on me, or I somehow otherwise received a refresh all basic effect. So if you know how tenacity works, you pretty much know how this stuff works. The difference is you have to at least with some amount of efficiency connect with it, right? So once per minute on basics, once per hour on complexes, unlimited number of times on ultimates, items, bestowments. All right. Next page. Here's the end of the text from the last page, right? Once per hour for complexes, any number of times for ultimates, bestowments, items. So in the above example, backstep 2 as a basic would allow this attribute to be used. And if you did use it, then it wouldn't activate for any other basics that you used until, right, you refresh all basic, either through time or a refresh all basic effect. Okay, next. This one is, I think, how this was being played anyway, which is fine. Self abilities that are not magic no longer require a free hand to use, which makes sense, right? Like the scoundrel, like self cure entangle. You don't need like a hand necessarily to do it. And then self cure abilities of all types can be used to remove the effect that they cure, even if that effect normally prevents ability use. But it has to be specifically called out as a self thing, right? So like the technically the old version of the rule book, scoundrels had self cure paralyze, and it was impossible to use. You just couldn't ever possibly use it, and that's obviously not the intention. Yeah, and there's all the touch cures and stuff out there are not self, and so that doesn't account for this. There's like a very small number of abilities that sort of account for this, but also like Slayer, like death strikes into heals and stuff. Like you don't need a free hand for that. That doesn't make sense. So I think this covers every case nicely. I took a look through, and I think this is just a nice clean change, and it is the intended rule anyway, and is hopefully how folks were playing it. Another reminder, because text changed in the book, put the full description here, right? The lethal effect has new clarifying text, that lethal effects are always short, never have a duration other than 10 seconds unless specifically stated, right? Lethal slow 1 minute. Otherwise, but also we're still including the word short in the effect calls. There's no plan right now to change it. It could change in the future. There's a thing I would like to do, but I don't know. We'll see. What do we have? All right. These are the full inflict changes, right? So the two new rules that we briefly covered earlier. First, can be applied to any effect call, not just damage. So inflict short pain is a game call that you might hear now. When that happens, it means the second change, you can't call return against anything with inflict in it. So what can you and can't you call? Well, I'm glad you asked. There's a nice little list here. So the calls that cannot be made against anything with the word inflict in it are reduce, soak, and return, which is really reduce and return because soak is reduce. Everything else can still be used, right? So that's parry, dodge, resist, no effect, absorb, fortitude, and counter, the appropriate thing. So if you get hit with an inflict 10, you can still call fortitude, right? And it reduces you to 0. You can still fortitude through that. It's just reduce and return that can't get used. Basically it gets through like armor. Those are like the things that armor can do, or some sort of facsimile therein of having armor. So these things bypass that in some way, shape, or form, from sort of a flavor standpoint. All right. Clarifying text has been added to reduce that explains the call reduced to short that we've been using on staff side all year that I think made sense to people, hopefully. And it means that a 1 minute effect it has its duration reduced to 10 seconds instead, right? If you hit an enemy with a disable and they call reduced to short, it means that they're taking a short disable instead of a disable. What else? Let's see. Clarifying text added to Harrow and Fortitude, stating that Fortitude can be used to end Harrow and Lethal Harrow when taking hit point damage under one of those effects, which was always the intention, is that even if you get hit with a Lethal Harrow and then take hit point damage, you can Fortitude through it and stay alive. So we just added that reminder. This was always the intention. Is it a rules change? I don't know. I think Fortitude got used twice last year, and no player is going to have it for a little bit. So we're just cleaning this up preemptively. And a small change to the ability and attribute stacking section in Chapter 7. It's updated to reflect the new combo into text that we're using. And it follows the exact same rules as the old effect to effect rules for stacking, which is all of the attribute rules, which is you can apply one attribute to an ability use, and that's it. You can only ever apply one. You can't turn an ability into another ability that you then have tenacity with, but it doesn't go multiple levels. You get one. Everybody gets one. All right. So now I think we're into the good part. Yeah. All right. Now we're into the part that everybody came for. And I think, yeah. All right. So this is our last bit too, and it'll take us probably a couple minutes to get through this. All right. Path and specialization changes. I immediately start by listing vocation changes instead, because of course. Courtier, which historically has had interactions with social effects, like one might expect of such an individual. Now, the following are the new courtier vocation abilities, and they're going to look very familiar, but also different and better now. All right, so once per twilight, resist social or psychic. We add psychic as an option on there. Resisting psychic effects is relatively rare in the game right now still. So it's a interesting and powerful ability. Represents their it could represent a number of things, right? It could represent how sort of sharp your mind is and the ability to sort of navigate or shrug off certain things that might try to weasel their way in there and manipulate you in some way, shape, or form. So once per twilight, resist a social or psychic effect of your choice. Additionally, used to have the social suggestion still on there. Now it's once per twilight instead of once per event. You can still do short ritual social suggestion, or you can do short ritual packet psychic suggestion. And we're going to see that a lot of the things that are social suggestions end up with an option that's like a psychic suggestion to put an additional sort of type on there and represent that it might be more difficult to get into certain creatures' heads and mess with them. So these are new courtier abilities. They replace the old ones, and they are unilaterally improvements. Courtier got buffs. All right, next, laborer. So laborer, right, starts with 3 levels in an artisan, specialization and whatnot. We wanted to, particularly because we introduced a catch-up mechanic for folks for crafting, which we're happy to have in the game, but sort of undermines the laborer stuff a little bit. And we don't really want that to be the case. So we're adding a note in there. It's not technically an ability that they have, but laborers have bonuses when they're working to unlock their like further specialization at Artisan level 6, including but not limited to reduced requirements to complete a process manual. Those are separate words. To complete the process manual in order to unlock the specialization. And then Tourist also had a reference to social abilities. And so now, instead of once per event resist social, I think it was resist social suggestion before, we're adding psychic onto there as well. And so that should be pretty useful over the course of an event. You should have, even if you didn't encounter a social or a suggestion thing, you will likely encounter a psychic effect at some point. Cool. All right. Now on to the main event. Here's where the real deal starts, right? All right, fighter core. Fighter 6 becomes dual parry. Not unexpected, right? This is what we were talking about before. Next, brute changes. We got 2 changes here. The first one is to use our new terms, right? Brute 4 becomes lone self-inflict 2, combo into melee 5 damage, right? And so this is with our new descriptions and everything, this is just it's cleaner. And I think just kind of makes more sense looking at it, right? You're like, oh, I inflict 2 on myself, and that lets me use a melee 5 damage. And so this one also used to cost 2 basics. Now it costs 1, but it's lone. And that's the trade-off. Still very good. Also, is an inflict 2, so you can't reduce or soak that coming in any way, or be like, ooh, I like do it to myself, but I can return it or something. No, none of that. None of those things. If you have like a resist damage from something, that would still work on it. But yeah. Oh, it's also self. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think it's breaks anything, but there's some interesting stuff there. All right, and then Brute 6, which previously was ritual or short ritual social fear, now has an additional option, like we talked about, right? So they keep the social fear, and now they also get a lone melee short fear or flurry as a complex if they want to use that. And you can do both of them. Like they're not both lone or like exclusive to whatever. No, you just like you get 2 abilities at Brute 6, and you can use both of them under the normal ability use rules. All right, Slayer abbreviated this stuff here because the Slayer 3, 7, 8, and 9 all use Death Strike 2 something as the old convention, and they are all now Death Strike combo into something. Those abilities have no functional change. They work exactly the way they did before. All right, that's it for fighters. Scoundrel 4. Scoundrel 4, which used to be Red Insight, is now Backstab 2, combo into Backstab 2, or melee 2 damage. And so this was sort of always... Whoa. Sorry about that. All right, this was always what Scoundrel was supposed to have, but there wasn't a good way to word it before. The ways to word it before were terrible. And so this wording is much better and allows it to exist in the way that Scoundrel should probably have it. So what this means, exactly what it looks like, use a Backstab 2, and you get a free Backstab 2 or melee 2. And yeah, you're generally going to get that through basics, and so you get it once a minute. It's this way so that if you use a Backstab 2 on an enemy and they don't turn around, you can just drop another Backstab 2 into them. Or if they do turn around, it doesn't shut off your ability to use your free ability use, right? You get to surprise them with a melee 2 from the front instead. So that should be fun, and I hope people have fun with it. All right. Also expected, Scoundrel 6 is dual dodge. Like we talked about before, right? Parry and dodge are going to be dual now. When we see resist magic and resist psychic show up later, as just sort of active resistances against those effect types. Those will also be dual. All right. Performer. Performer gets a solid number of changes for a bunch of different reasons. All right. Performer 1, first off, becomes short ritual social suggestion, which used to be the 6. So right out of the gate, it takes 10 seconds instead of a minute. Also, the new option is short ritual packet psychic suggestion as a complex. So this is your in combat but not actively in combat suggestion, or any other reason you might want to have to throw a packet to do it. Performer 6, which used to be the old short ritual social suggestion, now becomes packet magic sleep. And being the jack of all trades list, the only thing that was really missing off of Performer was some kind of classically arcane themed spell. And this seemed like a good one. So this is the one they've got. So now you truly have a little bit of everything. Then at 9, 9 used to be short ritual touch, grant resist social. Now it's grant resist social or psychic, chosen at time of use. And that's a complex. It just snuck down there. It just got better. Everything up to this point has gotten better, right? All of these things are better than before. You have more options. It's easier to use your abilities. All right. Which will lessen the sting of Performer 10, which is no longer 20 complexes for an ultimate, which was, I don't know. I don't know how that made it. Well, it's not so bad when there's not, a bunch of people that could take it. So that needed to scale back a little. It's still, it's lone, right? Still, it's only a short ritual, so it doesn't take you a full minute. You definitely pull this off in combat without that much issue. So you get to do a magic refresh all complex to someone, and then you also get a refresh all complex. And the second part's not a spell, right? So you do your 10 seconds, you give it to them, and then you can immediately just get yours as well. Right? You spend 10 seconds, you do your thing, refresh all complex, and then immediately, right, you're just refresh all complex. So this is still very good. It's still above rate for what we would consider what an ultimate can do. That's where that's gonna land for the moment. All right. Vagabond gets a single change, right? So Vagabond 5 used to be backstab 2 tenacity. We took Red Insight off of Scoundrel 4, replaced it with Scoundrel's new tenacity. So now all of the 4 core lists in the game get a functional tenacity for one of their 2-point basics at level 4, which is always the hope of what it was going to be. Our new game terminology, our new combo into terminology allows for that, so we're going to do it. And now Vagabond gets Red Insight because there's no insight on just Scoundrel anymore. So now the insight that you get as a Scoundrel is determined by your specialization. So Vagabond gets Red Insight at 5, and like we will see in a second. The other ones didn't change, so we won't see it in a second. Performer gets Blue Insight at 5, and then Golden Insight at 8. This is 8 now, 5 and 3. And then Assassin gets Blue Insight at 8. So combined with the other insight changes that we're going to see later, the majority of insight, the insight in most instances that you're going to have access to will be determined by the specialization you take for your path. The 2 instances where an insight shows up at level 5 are now Vagabond and Performer. So if you take one of those as your subpath specialization, that's the only way right now in the rulebook to pick up a second insight. Otherwise, you'll only have the one unless you play Performer, in which case you'll have 2, right, at 5 and 8. But non-Scoundrel don't have insight below level 8 now, because the specialization attributes show up at 5 and 8. So yes. So as opposed to putting other sort of arbitrary limits on insight or trying to figure out other rules or something, we made those changes, and now you can get 2 at most, and you get rewarded. That's sort of like a scoundrel bonus for playing not the martial powerhouse that is Assassin on there. So I think that also makes it a more compelling choice for characters that are less combat interested. You could sort of like be scoundrelly on the side too. So that could be fun. That could be hopefully more fun than it was, or at least as fun as it was before. All right. What else? Magic user. All right. Magic user changes on the core list at 10. Becomes quick cast. Was not quick cast before. Now that Performer's getting it at 6, Magic user at 10 just gets it as a quick cast spell instead of requiring an incant. And so Erudite gets a change, right? Erudite used to have blue insight at 5. Now Erudite 5 and 8 have exchange places, and that means blue insight's at level 8. And Erudite 5, which is the ritual self-bestow, like one of a list of short effects. That shows up at level 5 now, and as a way to soften the blow a little bit of having to wait to get blue insight, which is good on discovers and is worth an extra ultimate every event. Erudite 5 now bestows a quick cast version of that spell on themselves. So that got better. This is sort of a same attributes as before. One shows up 3 events later and means that you can't get it by subpathing into Erudite. And in exchange, you get your sort of spell casting one sooner. And it got a little more powerful. So that's Erudite. Next. All right. Ranger. Are we already into... We're not. I went 2 pages. We're on Adept. Not quite there yet. All right. So on Adept 4 becomes Lone Packet Magic Dispel. Used to cost 2 basics. So we made it Lone. And now it costs 1 basic. And then Adept 9, which used to be Resist Magic, right? An active Resist Magic defense. This has become Dual now. Then those are the only Adept changes. There's a buff to Dispel. The odds of you needing to use it or wanting to use it twice in a minute seem low. And Dual Resist Magic is a across the game balance. Hexer gets a couple of changes. So Hexer 5, which is their attribute, the one that's used to be self-inflict to self-refresh basic, just gets the new combo into terminology. There's no functional change there. And Hexer 6 becomes Short Ritual Social Magic Suggestion. Used to be Ritual. All the Ritual Socials became Short Ritual Socials. Nice and easy. And then Hexer 6 gets an additional option, which is Short Ritual Quick Cast Magic Suggestion. So Hexer also gets a Magic Suggestion option, but you have to have it as your path specialization in order to get it. So you have to commit to the Hexer life in order to get it. No way to subpath into that one. You can subpath into Performer and get Suggestion, but not subpath into Hexer and get it. Hexer 7 becomes Lone Short Ritual Packet Magic Short Rage. So this one used to cost 2 basics before and be Lone. Now it costs 1 basic, but is a short ritual. So still very good, but is likely much more difficult to pull off in a fight now. but only costs you a basic to give it a shot. So still, yeah, one of the best basics in the game still. Arguably better than before. All right, on to Devout. A couple of changes here. Nope, just the one. Yeah, just the one. All right. Devout 8 used to be Touch Magic Heal 5 Tenacity. That was a lot. And stacked with certain things oddly and wasn't useful to everyone. And was another instance where Liminalist had it best. And we're working to actively scale that part back and provide some parity across across the Devout specialization. So Devout 8 becomes as many times as you want, Ritual Self, Bestow, Touch, Quick Cast, Magic Heal 5. So if you don't have another bestowment, and Erudite 5 still bypasses the bestowment rules, right? It's its own bestowment slot. So you could do Erudite 5 and this from Devout 8. You could still bestow both of those things on yourselves at any given time. So going into any fight, you have an extra complex, basically. You have an extra heal 5 and it's quick cast. And so that's equally useful to everyone, which is great. That's what we like. All right. Liminalist change. The only Liminalist change this time, which is nice. We didn't have to do like a big pile of changes to Liminalist again. So Liminalist 5 and 8 change places. Blue Insight used to be at 5, and now it moves to 8. Again, to limit the number of total insights that folks can have and what the combinations of paths and subpaths and specializations look like in order to unlock those. And then moving down to 5 is the Packet Magic Inflict 2 Tenacity. That moves to 5 instead, which is neat. They get a second tenacity at 5. So you get 1 at 4, right, on Devout, and then 1 at 5 on Liminalist. Still very good. Naturalist. What do we have? Two changes? Yeah, 2 simple changes. All right. The level 2 ultimate, right, the absorb element to self refresh complex uses the new combo into terminology. So no functional change, just a terminology change. And then Naturalist 9, which has on it still short ritual, social, poison, sleep, now also gives Packet poison, sleep as a complex option. Giving additional options to the levels that had social effects on them, or social abilities and effects. No. Get out of there. Wow. Misclick once and we go to next week. All right. Well, everybody saw some stuff. Mystic 9 becomes dual resist psychic. Used to just be resist psychic before. Not an unexpected change. All right. Prestige path changes. A lot of this is terminology. Some are functional things or things that were previously oversights. So Blade Dancer 3 becomes it used to be lone melee 2 damage flurry. We added backstab as an option. Backstab 2 is an option in there because it should have been before. And particularly now that Scoundrel 4 has the backstab combo attribute, you can get some more mileage out of this one, depending. So this will give you 5 total uses across those two abilities, but at a certain point you should be able to tenacity both of the options, which is cool. So sort of versatile. It's a buff from before in a couple ways. And then Blade Dancer 5 used to be parry tenacity, which will never show up in the game again, and is now gone. And has weird interactions with duel anyway, so we're just not going to do it. But now your dodges and your parries, depending on which one you have, right? If you took Fighter or Scoundrel as your path, those combo into, or one of them an hour combos into a backstab melee, a backstab disable or melee disable. So that's technically a nerf, but it was never gonna survive the cutting room floor. So all right, a couple things for Rake, right? So Rake 2 uses the new combo into terminology. It also becomes dual. We're going to see a couple of instances where these specific defenses that also refresh stuff become dual because they're powerful. So Rake Hail 3 and 4 get a new note that, and this was always the intention, was that they could only be used. These are the ones that turn a poison that you're using into a better poison. So these ones now can only be used with poisons that you have applied to your own weapons, which is again always the intent. So that doesn't really change either. All right, Spell Sword just gets one change at 3. The parry into self-refresh all basic becomes dual, which makes sense. That lines up with the other changes that we're making to defenses. Fate Sealer 5 changes. It was sort of a boring capstone to the list. When you can cast your own enchantments on your weapons every minute anyway. So being able to do death strikes of any energy when you already have access to them is, yeah. There's certainly some instances where it might be useful, but it just wasn't exciting. So we're going to lean into sort of the curse adjacent part of what's going on there. And now anytime they get hit with a harrow, short harrow, lethal harrow, short lethal harrow, any of that stuff, they can just reduce it to a curse effect instead. It'll be a 1-minute curse, even if you're reducing a 10-second effect. But in almost all instances, it'll mean that you can get hit more than one time without going to 0. So yeah, they also didn't really have any defensive abilities on there, and so giving them this is a neat little defensive ability that has a chance to provide some extra protections against a really dangerous effect. All right, what's next? Champion. I think this was a change that we had made last year, and we are now reverting. But Champion 2 is no longer lone. It's just touch silver enchantment. Not a spell. You just do it. You just touch a thing, and it's silver now. And there's a new note. I don't remember if the note was there before, but it has a note now that silver enchantment tenacity can be used with it any number of times, not just once per hour. So as many of your complexes as you want, or even if you get single complexes refreshed instead of all of them, then you can spend a complex and get 2 silver enchantments out, even if you're silenced, even if you're in a place where magic abilities can't be used, even if, I don't know, some other things or something. But so Champion gets that buff to their silver enchantment abilities. Spell Thief gets a couple of changes. The Absorb Magic to refresh all basic becomes dual. This is expected at this point. Spell Thief 3, which was Backstab Dispel before, now becomes Backstab Dispel combo into self grant 5 armor, which means that if you use it and you dispel something, right, if it gets no affected because your target doesn't have anything to dispel, which should be the response if you don't have any grants, bestowments, or weapon enchantments, right? The call should be no effect to let them know that it didn't do anything. But if it doesn't get no affected, then you're like, you're eating that magic effect and converting it into 5 armor for yourself. So an upgrade, and it's a power win and a flavor win. And then Spell Thief 4 updated to use the new combo into terminology, right, which is the backstab into like self refresh complex. All right, next page. All right, now we're on to Ranger for real. All right, so Ranger 1, lone short ritual backstab maim, doesn't go away, but has that 10-second lead in that like the assassin backstab death has. So you gotta line up that hit for a little bit on your way in, sneaking up behind somebody. But it's still a maim for a basic, so it's pretty good. Seeker. All right, so Seeker gets 2 changes, and I think Seeker wins the award for most intricate ability name in the game. All right, so Seeker 3 is not the most involved ability name in the game. It is so used to be resist, fear, pain, or rage. Now got an upgrade. You absorb fear, pain, or rage to grant yourself 5 temporary hit points. So full on buff there. Also not dual, right? Because it only works against fear, pain, rage. So you can use your 2 dodges if you have them, and then still use this against other things. So that's an additional level of power that it now has. Seeker 5 changes a little bit with our new combo into terminology. So now it's backstab 2 or 5, or 2 and 5, fire and silver, right? Backstab 2 fire, backstab 2 silver, backstab 5 fire, backstab 5 silver. All can activate this. Combos into backstab or melee, right? Backstab the same number, the same energy, or melee the same number, the same energy. So use a backstab 2 fire, get a melee 2 fire or backstab 2 fire. Same thing for backstab 5 fire, silver. Same thing for yeah. So and there's a note in the rule book, right, that the damage and the energy type of the follow-up ability match the damage and energy type of the first ability, but the follow-up can be either a backstab or melee. Yeah. So and it'll only work with, right, 1 basic and 1 complex still, because it's a single attribute. So you don't get like a backstab 2 fire and a backstab 2 silver that activate it, right? You get 1 basic, 1 complex. All right. Hierophant got some changes in a couple of ways. Some of it's good, some of it's fixes, some of it's maybe lightly disappointing, but still fine. All right, so Hierophant 1 becomes a lone touch magic heal 5 for a single basic. And that's good. It's still a very powerful ability. It's also, and I just made a quick note here, it's the same thing. It's identical to the Performer 4 ability. I think this is the first case in the rulebook where 2 levels of different lists get the same ability. But you can't have Performer and Hierophant at the same time. So yeah, we are aware that it's the same as another thing somewhere. All right, Hierophant 4, which is the ultimate. That was like the refresh all ultimate on somebody. That's once per event now. It costs an ultimate. It's once per event. Getting 2 ultimates for 1 ultimate is way above curve overall. Also, the increased number of players coming to the game and the popularity of the list means that it would be a big nightmare for us to try to balance this. And we don't want to have to do that. And we don't want folks who are maybe not getting all of those ultimates refreshed on them to have a tougher time. And yeah, so it's just it's a clean change. It's still very powerful. And but you can do it once, which is either, you can either use it to get an extra ultimate for yourself once an event, which is sort of a blue insight adjacent. You can also use it to just refresh both of somebody else's ultimates for one of yours, which is also great. As needed, right? It's still a very powerful support ability, but this sort of this keeps the flavor of it, keeps the spirit of it, without allowing it to become a game-breakingly powerful ability. Hierophant 5 has changed because the old one didn't even work for everybody anymore, and it was intentionally glossed over at the time because it wasn't immediately pertinent. But it's going to be pertinent this year, and I want folks to know what it's going to be. So, it's an attribute that falls into our new combo into type of attribute, and anytime someone with Hierophant 5 uses a cure or a cure specific effect, right? Anything with cure in it, you get a free touch quick cast magic heal 2. And this is useful to all of the specializations, and even more useful beyond that because there's a number of consumable game items that cure things like runes. A lot of runes cure effects. And so anytime you use one of those, you're also getting a free touch quick cast magic heal 2. Beyond that, it has a note that it can be used any number of times. It can activate any number of times for any type of abilities. If you use all of your basics on cure effects, like if you have naturalist and you're curing root effects off of everybody, then you're getting a free heal 2 off of each of those. There's no this could always activate, just can keep going and going and going. So you do a thing with a word cure in it, you get a magic heal 2 in the next 10 seconds as long as you don't do something else first. So very good, arguably way better than before. Oh, also, I completely forgot to put this change in the log. I'll make a note to myself to update it. The life effect just brings you back to full hit points now instead of 1. That's way more fun anyway. So this is exclusively a buff to Hierophant. They still get what their old attribute did. In fact, everybody gets it now. So I need to make a note of that. Yeah, that's the other half of this change. So Hierophant got better, got a little worse, but brought into line with everything else, and then got better. So Hierophant's still good, which is important because Thaumaturge is a heck of a list, and we're about to take a look at it. So Thaumaturge is the right. So Herald of Malevolence gone out of Magic User Devout, and replaced by Thaumaturge. So Thaumaturge sacrifices the direct healing that Hierophant has in favor of making attacks and supporting allies in other ways. And the intention is for them to be able to sort of effectively navigate the battlefield in a way that a Hierophant wouldn't be able to. So at level 1, this is not lone. This is an all-the-time treat. You get a quick cast magic inflict 2 that combos into a quick cast magic heal 2. And that can be all of your basics if you want. This doesn't activate any tenacities anywhere or anything like that. But I'll have to look at that and see if that's... I think as it's currently worded, it does, but it's not going to. So treat it like it's not going to. But yeah, and these are both quick cast. So that's an improvement over the non-quick cast inflict 2 that shows up on Liminalist. And so even if you take Liminalist, this is an upgrade. If you don't take Liminalist, this is even better because it gives you an entire other option that you didn't have before, and lets you sort of stand on the line, throw a packet in, and you have to land it, right, to get the follow-up. But if you land it, then you're also healing people on the line with you. So you have to take a more active role in combat, but if you do, the rewards are not insignificant, right? You're getting if you're good, you're able to double your basics, which is the thing we took away before. But I am doing my damnedest to tempt people away from the Hierophant life. So we'll see how this goes. All right, and that's just level 1. That's like play an event, and now this is your life. All right, level 2. Lone, touch magic, heal 5. Not exciting. Combos into touch magic, grant 5 armor. You can do this to different people if you want. So heal 5 for a complex is on rate. 2 complexes for a complex above rate. So this one is lone, but you can do heal 5 and then 5 armor to somebody. The number of things in the game that grant armor are relatively limited too. So this gives you sort of a more specialized support role that you can play by providing an effect that otherwise shows up less. And if you need to sort of run over to somebody and maybe you're out of ultimates or you're trying to save them for something, you can still, right, like give them 10 functional points that they've of like healing or, you know, over healing, right? Next. Similar, but this one is a quick cast magic inflict 5 that combos into a touch magic grant 5 armor. This one's also lone, but also above rate still. So this is the one where if you're standing on the back line and you want to pass out an extra buff to somebody for whatever reason, right? You toss a packet, got to land it, but if you do, then you're passing out a 5 armor to somebody. Yeah, the active, right, the active like second rank of the fight is you. You are built for that with this list, and we are not done yet. All right, here's your ultimate. Packet quick cast magic inflict 10, combo into touch quick cast magic heal 10. I don't know why this is underlined. I've took that underline out 10 times and it's still there. Anyway, this is not lone either. If you need to do a big heal and you're confident you can land that packet, you get a 10 damage and a heal 10. You couldn't possibly ask for more than that. So all of their abilities are intentionally combos because this the sort of flavor of the thaumaturge is weaving your magic user and devout spells together, which is why they each have like a part of each of those lists sort of together. That's why your quick casting inflicts, right? You're sort of taking the best of both worlds. And then as you're sort of weaving damaging spells, you're also turning them into beneficial spells or turning, beneficial spells into even more supportive spells, and all that good stuff. And then to top it all off, to help you not immediately die out there with your limited number of hit points from being magic user devout, anytime you got a minute, you can have 5 armor. So at the start of every fight, you're walking in with 11 points, which lets you take a 10 damage hit and keep going. Thaumaturge is very powerful. We'll see if people play it. I can't imagine making it any more powerful, so hopefully some folks will try it out, and we'll see how it goes. It might be too much. If it is, we'll walk it back a little bit, but it looks a lot of fun. And I'd be very tempted to play this list with a team of friends and be, I don't know. This feels like the caster list where you can stand out there on the line with everybody and drop behind the line if you need to or want to, and still continue to be just as effective. So that is the Thaumaturge, which wraps up our non-malevolence portion of our program this evening. So moving on to malevolence. All right. So malevolence is a new prestige path category. It has 2 prestige paths on it: Herald of Malevolence and Marauder of Malevolence. In order to select one of these prestige paths at check-in for the first time, a character must have played at least one event, and a point of prestige potential must be sacrificed from another category. When you do that, you move that point into the Malevolence category. Additionally, you can only choose Herald of Malevolence if your path or subpath is Magic User or Devout, and you can only choose Marauder if your path or subpath is Fighter or Scoundrel. In the case of a character choosing a combination of paths like Devout Fighter, they could choose either one. So if one of your, like if your path is Fighter or Scoundrel and then your subpath is Magic User or Devout, you can pick either of the two. And so there's some more, you get sort of more options. Well, you do. There's like there's a lot more options of when you can take these lists. But we'll see that there's also been some changes to some of this to help balance that factor out as well. It was strong and continues to be strong. And so yeah. All right. So Herald of Malevolence has some changes to bring it in line with power level of some other things. So the level 1, which used to just be lone Packet Magic 5 Fire, now requires a self-inflict 2 in order to get that going. So you gotta give it a couple of hit points in order to cast that. Also, at 2, you got to sacrifice some more hit points to get that 10 damage for a complex. Yeah. So those are those. Level 3 is Rage instead of Choke now, which lines up better thematically, and also is less of a full, like, all or nothing takedown of an opponent. It's maybe better. It's kind of a side grade, but it thematically it's more appropriate. And so yeah, it becomes Rage. That one doesn't cost you any hit points to do. And then at level 4, now it's a short ritual. So you need 10 uninterrupted seconds to throw a death spell. We're leaning into the no unconditional death effects. So either it's, time to set it up or something else, some other factor in play in order to get a death. Or you got to like jump through some hoops, like with the rake, getting that death. If you're like partway into a fight and you like need to put a poison on a weapon, then you like got to take time and do that, or be like carrying another weapon and then pull it out to do a thing. So this is their condition on their death effect. So still very, very powerful, but needs some additional support from somewhere, because they are channeling vicious magic through themselves that they're not really controlling. They're just acting as a conduit for. And so that takes a toll on things. And we will see that theme continued in the Marauder of Malevolence. So where the Herald is the caster, right, who is siphoning Malefice off of malefactors. The Marauder of Malevolence is a warrior, or someone with an amount of martial prowess, who has figured out ways to siphon off Malefice that is sort of latently around them, right? The bits of it that sneak out of Malevolence and into the universe proper. they can grab those bits and use them and sort of shove them into themselves, or have this like instinctual connection, right, to Maleficent that lets them interact with it in certain ways. All right, so level 1, we're gonna look a little familiar, right? Lone, self-inflict 2, just like before, and you get a backstab 5 fire or a melee 5 fire. She's got to take 2 points to get it. Next, you get a lone, backstabber melee 5 fire, and then you get to self heal 5 from that. That's another sort of theme across Malevolence, is damage to heal. It showed up in a couple places. It's in the trials and stuff too. So this was a natural fit for the martial-oriented Malevolence list. Level 3. This one's going to look familiar. Absorb Fear, Pain, Rage combo into self-grant 5 hit points. This is the same ability that Seeker has. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Level 4. This one's a doozy. Lone self-inflict 10, combo into melee and magic fire death. There's no other like melee death in the game. But you got to pay a pretty big price for this one. Out of the gate, it's possible you don't even have 10 hit points when you're getting this. So you might need to, I don't know, absorb a fear effect off something in order to get past the 10 mark. Or maybe your thaumaturge buddy throws his 5 damage from the back and then gives you the 5 armor, right? And then you can inflict 10 on yourself and go down to like, 1 or 2 hit points, or 3 probably like 3-ish hit points. Yeah. So that's that'll be fun for people, I think. And is not without substantial risk to self, because you got to get into melee to use it, and you only have 10 seconds, and you can't do anything else in the meantime. So, yeah, this is a little risk reward gameplay. And then lastly, you get a blanket attribute that reduces maims to disables. That should keep them going a little bit. They can juice themselves up with some latent Maleficent kicking around to sort of push through a broken limb in some ways. At least get it fixed easier, right? Because the devout get cure disable as a, well, without having to wait 10 seconds or having to spend a higher level ability, right? So that's it. We made it through the document. It only took a little longer than I thought it was going to. Yeah, this is the end. So yeah, there's a lot of changes, but most people only need to know a couple of them. The PC cheat sheet, I have a new version of it ready to go. Gonna get that uploaded. I'm gonna get it shared, and I'll put the link on the wiki in the place the old link was. The rulebook and the changelog are going to get uploaded to the website, and I'll make an announcement on our social media that those things are getting moved. If folks have questions, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit. Chat stopped showing new messages for me a while ago. I don't know if people are not messaging or I don't know, wandered off. But the rulebook proper has all of these things in it now. They're all updated, and yeah, should be good to go for our event in a couple of weeks. We've got some other exciting stuff that we'll be talking